So they said, you know what? Let's skip out on the global warming. Let's just go with climate change.
Mm.
Climate change, it can go either way. It can go to the extreme, to the cold, or the extreme to the hot. We'll always have a message to be able to sell in order to get people's taxes in the guise of fighting climate change. Um,
Right.
and unfortunately, this is what we're learning about this guy, that this guy bought into that narrative. We're learning that this is a person that was identified with, kind of being a climate activist, saying that, we are going to be facing record warming periods,
Wow.
which is so interesting because uh, going back to what I was saying is this is something that has been controversial that I've shared before, in that over 95% of all fires are not natural
Wow.
fires, but they're actually man-made
Hmm.
fires. And special election basically is just one single proposition, Prop 50, in which, Governor Newsom is basically saying, hey, Californians, I need you guys to give me temporary powers so that we can go ahead and combat the Republican agenda. And essentially what this is in 2010, Californians decided that the redistricting, or the way there's going to be equal representation of political parties within California, should not be left in the hands of a governor. It should not be left in the hands of one major political party. I think that a political party in power should have all the power to kind of redistrict and change things around California to better their political party or their personal bias. Then by all means, vote yes on Prop 50. But if you are someone like myself that doesn't believe that either Republicans or Democrats should have that power, regardless of who holds the supermajority in California, then you should be voting no. Because by voting no, you're voting in alignment with what California voters voted in 2010
Mm.
and established. We've already decided as residents of California, as voters of California, this shouldn't be in the hands of Republicans or Democrats or libertarians or anybody, because we want equal representation and fairness at the state level for all political parties and all political voters. It doesn't matter, who has the majority. And so I would say that if you're doing this because you want to kind of give the middle finger to Republicans or other political parties, just remember that there could be a time where California does flip red or Republican, which again, we're on that trend already. Then you can't really cry wolf when Republicans in power are starting to pass these egregious laws to make sure that they remain in power in California. And so I would just say, if you want to be fair about it, you've got to vote no
Hmm.
on Measure.
3 balls, 2 strikes, pressure is on. This is where we discuss real estate, property improvement, and business. Together, we'll strategize on how to win. Welcome to the Full Count. Welcome back to Full Count Podcast. We have our special guest again, Anthony Cabassa, investigative reporter and independent journalist. So, Anthony, thank you so much for being on today. This is great.
Hey, thanks for having me, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And just so everyone knows, again, if you can do a brief introduction. I know you were on last time. We talked about the Palisades and Eaton fire, which we'll do some updating today. But if you can just introduce yourself one more time.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Anthony Cabassa. I go by Informed with Anthony across all socials. I've been doing independent journalism in the greater Los Angeles County and really across the nation since 2017 independently. I'm self-funded. I don't have any strings attached. That's why I'm able to kind of go after some of these very pressing topics that maybe other journalists or reporters wouldn't touch.
Hmm.
And yeah, I cover mostly a lot of protests, especially across the nation. I think I gained a lot of notoriety during my George Floyd protest coverage that was across the nation, if you guys remember that. And then, of course, also during COVID, I was also covering some of the journalists and some of the frontline doctors that were raising some red flags on, hey, like, what's really going on with the pandemic? And is this really about keeping everyone safe? Which guaranteed me censorship online. But here we are a couple of years later, them admitting that everything we reported was right, and so on and so forth. So yeah, again, thank you so much for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Of course. That's quite a resume, man, that you've been building and the notoriety you keep getting, which is well deserved. So we appreciate you being on, no strings attached, so you can kind of say what's on your mind and obviously the facts. So I wanted to check with you about the alleged arsonist that is the latest update in the Pacific Palisades. What can you inform us on and update everybody on regarding that?
Yeah, so I have to like pull up this guy's name because
Yeah.
I keep forgetting the young man's name, but this guy was a young guy, 29 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He was local here to Los Angeles, and he was working, I guess, Uber the night of the day that he decided to start this fire. This was kind of early in the morning, December, or late in the night rather, about early morning, January 1st, December 31st, kind of that area. He had just finished dropping off a Uber
Mm-hmm.
client, and some of the writers were saying that he was kind of an angry person, that he kind of seemed disgruntled, he kind of seemed agitated leading up to the day of this fire. And the FBI arrested him. I guess he had fled to Melbourne, Florida, where he had kind of escaped California, maybe trying to flee some of this investigation that has been ongoing for so many months, since January, really, and kind of trying to better understand what really happened with the Pacific Palisades fire, the Eaton fire, and some of the other fires across SoCal. This is something that I've actually been talking about for years now, in which people are talking about climate change.
Mm-hmm.
It used to be global warming, but then people at the leadership decided that global warming wasn't good enough, because there were some reports that we're actually going through a cooling period. And so people were saying, well, wait a minute, how can there be global warming if there's a cooling period, and some of these regions across the nation are reporting cooler than usual. So they said, you know what, let's skip out on the global warming. Let's just go with climate change.
Mm-hmm.
Climate change, it can go either way. It can go to the extreme, to the cold, or the extreme to the hot. We'll always have a message to be able to sell in order to get people's taxes in the guise of fighting climate change. Um,
Right.
and unfortunately, this is what we're learning about this guy, that this guy bought into that narrative. We're learning that this is a person that was identified with, kind of being a climate activist, saying that, we are going to be facing record warming periods,
Wow.
which is so interesting, because it's uh, going back to what I was saying is this is something that has been controversial that I've shared before, in that over 95% of all fires are not natural
Wow.
fires, but they're actually man-made
Mm-hmm.
fires. And this is something that has been a point of contention. People say that I'm just kind of this anti-science guy, that hey, how dare you say that, humans are creating this? And then lo and behold, here's this guy who I guess is a self-identified climate activist, and now he's starting fires and trying to blame, global warming for it. So it just kind of shows
Mm-hmm.
that I think what we're seeing is, when you push too hard on a certain subject, there's going to be people listening, and maybe they're just going to take actions into their own hands to kind of push that
Right.
narrative that, like, look, I've been sharing these articles for years, and there's documented evidence. If you guys go to the New York Post, there's documented evidence. They shared some of the snapshots of this guy's online profile, where he's been sharing for years, talking about global warming and climate change. And so what that does is, I think this guy is very disturbed. I think he might be a mentally ill person that maybe just wasn't getting help where he needed to. And so they're reading this agenda that there is this global warming, and that if we don't act now, that we're basically going to lose humanity, that overnight, humanity will be lost. And so people like him, that I think are mentally ill,
Mm-hmm.
and they're reading this, they're kind of waiting around, saying, when is this going to happen? Well, let's just take matters into our own hands, and we're just going to go ahead and start a fire now. And then I'll still be able to be like, hey, look, you see, this is the fires that I've been talking about. And so it's tragic that it's looking like this man was mentally ill, maybe disgruntled, maybe just on fallen in hard times, and all of this kind of led up to him starting this fire. And I think what's interesting about this report that I don't think enough people are touching on
Mm-hmm.
is that when he started that fire was put out. And what ended up happening was, 7 days later, this fire ended up reigniting. And so this kind of calls into question some of the tactics, perhaps, that some of our first responders were using. Obviously, a lot of people don't like to kind of insinuate or make it seem like maybe it was on the first responders not doing a good enough job. But there is video evidence showing that in that specific location where he lit a fire,
Hmm.
just the next day or a couple days later, the ground was still smoldering. And then 7 days later, because of the intense winds that we were experiencing in Southern California, uh, between the smoldering and just all the right elements of the wind and other factors, obviously the dry bush area surrounding that area, it ended up reigniting. And that's what ended up leading to one of the deadliest fires that we've had in California history, at least in modern history
Right.
for sure. So there, it's multi-level. Go ahead. Yeah.
Isn't the great irony of this whole thing that it's going to create a carbon footprint to light such a large fire in the first place, right? Isn't that what he's trying to prevent, based on his ideology? And this would just cause that even more, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So this is something that we can see on different levels in which people want to create this narrative that, hey,
Hmm.
something is super urgent, and if it's not happening enough, then they'll just kind of create a scenario where now it's happening, right? And so I think that with years of this young man kind of buying into the climate hysteria, and not to say that there isn't evidence, I'm not trying to diminish some of the great work that scientists out there are
For sure.
doing. Climate change, of course, is real. We've had climate change since the beginning probably of Earth, right? Climate has always changed.
Hmm.
There's actually a really good a bit by George Carlin, I believe that's his
Yeah.
name. He's a big stand-up guy, where he kind of goes into all the climate change that's happened over the billions of years with ice ages and lavas kind of erupting from these volcanoes for centuries and stuff. And so the climate is always changing. So I think that it is interesting at least to point out the fact that you have like the Al Gores and the Bernie Sanders of the world kind of crying out saying, if we don't do something now, then we're going to lose humanity as we know it. And what's kind of tragic about that is, again, you have people that might buy into it too much,
Hmm.
get a little bit hysterical, and just kind of acting out in this way of like, look, I told you guys. Sure, I started the fire myself, but that doesn't matter. Like, I've been warning you guys about this global warming for years, and you guys just didn't listen. And it's again, it's tragic because
Right.
12 people lost their lives, and you have vulnerable minds out there just kind of buying into it. And it's good to heed the caution of scientists. I just don't think that you need to take matter into your own hands. Just let it happen naturally. Kind of like what you were talking about is the irony here, right? That this guy has been a climate activist for years, sharing these articles, and then this is the guy that ended up creating one of the largest fires in California history.
Right. And that's the problem with all these narratives, whether left or right. If it goes too far out and it's, not always true, a lot of times, people that are vulnerable or people end up becoming crazy, or maybe they're already crazy and they get radicalized to some degree. And that's essentially what could have happened here, is what it sounds like. But at the same time, I do think a lot of these public officials have some draconian reasons for doing things. I remember when the fire happened, we didn't know the actual evidence yet, right? Evidence takes time, right? All this research and stuff like
Right.
that they were already throwing out, it's climate change. And it seems like it might have not been exactly that. There probably was some to it, but not in totality.
Right.
And
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. No, go ahead. Yeah.
oh, I was just gonna say the fact that the ground was still smoldering for days on end, and then that's when the fire erupted again. I did see Rick Caruso really call out Karen Bass for saying that the tactic, they should have used aircraft to really kill the fire, but that didn't take place. And there's also talk about how Karen Bass took money away from the fire department. I think $20 million. So there was a lot of incompetence and mismanagement, is what Rick Caruso is saying. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a lot of evidence that shows that there was a lot of mismanagement, that there was funds being taken away,
Hmm.
and again, it kind of goes into why was the response? Maybe the response would have been better. Maybe the response would have been more thorough. I would be very curious to kind of find out from firefighters, why do they think that this was probably, the fire wasn't put out properly, and why was the ground still
Hmm.
smoldering? days later. Is this common? Is this a common thing? Like, is there anything that they could have done that could have just completely stopped the fire with no smoldering underneath?
Right.
I've been responding to a couple fires here and there this year. I haven't been like a big kind of like fire guy. I know there's other like independent journalists that I kind of follow
Hmm.
that do chase kind of like these storms, whether it's thunderstorms, whether it's rainstorms. Climate is sometimes can kind of hit us in these extreme bursts, and of course the fires are no different. But for some reason, with the Pacific Palisades fire obviously being so detrimental and so historic in nature, I decided, you know what, let me head out there and just kind of apply my journalistic take that I do with, and the investigative stuff that I do with politics and politicians, and just let me apply it here. And I think that's something I talk about, is that everything is political, whether it's a fire, whether it's a robbery, whether it's crime, whatever it
Hmm.
is, everything ties back to politics of why was this allowed to happen, or how could this have happened, and how can we prevent it from happening moving forward. And so that is something that I was definitely looking into. And so I'd be very curious to see from a firefighter, especially some of my sources at Los Angeles Fire Department, to kind of hear what they have to say about the fact that this fire probably could have been prevented. Maybe there was lack of resources. Maybe there wasn't enough training, perhaps,
Hmm.
in which these firefighters went out there and thought that they had put out the fire, but clearly, again, it wasn't fully put out, or I don't know. Maybe there's something like, okay, if what you guys did was standard and this still led to a fire, how can this change moving forward? Will you guys now revisit the site of the fire 2 days later
Right.
to make sure that there's no smoldering? So these are important questions to ask, and I think that when they are presented by the media, and they should be, rightfully so. It doesn't matter. People sometimes want to criticize journalists because they're like, well, what do you know? You're right. I don't know.
Hmm.
And guess what? I represent a lot of people that don't know. And we're just asking basic questions, right? A firefighter will know why they weren't there 2 days later to assess the smoldering. So I want to get that answer. And then maybe just presenting the question as a normal person that doesn't know is, what can we do moving forward? Well, maybe that'll put the pressure on them to say, you know what, this is actually a pretty good question.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter if the person asking is a journalist or a citizen. This is a good question to be asked, and I think that that needs to be tackled in the future. And I'm sure, it doesn't take a journalist to ask this question. I'm sure they're probably assessing that now, looking back, right? Because I was in the military for 11 years, and one of the things that we used to do often is when we would perform an operation or when we responded to a crisis, what we would do is we would kind of have like a post-operation debriefing, saying what could we have done better. So I'm sure people at the fire department are probably looking at all the evidence. Obviously, you've got these fire detectives and fire chiefs that are kind of looking at like what went wrong and what can we do moving forward. And sometimes all it takes is a journalist reaching out for them to say, yeah, look, this was maybe a mistake on our part, or maybe this is something that we overlooked because it doesn't tend to happen. We underestimated the winds picking up in the days after, and so this is what we're going to do differently moving forward. And that's good. That's what we want. We want a fire department that's going to be ready for the next Palisades fire, and hoping that they are taking preventative measures so that it doesn't happen again.
Right. Right. And that low water pressure from the fire hydrant, that's why the water went out and the reservoir was empty for over a year. I think I saw, because of a seal was broken on top and they weren't able to get enough bids to make the replacement. And that's why the water was not present. So that all added to the problem of what happened. I think it's like 6,800 structures were burnt down. At least 50% of them or more were completely burnt. And then 12 people died, unfortunately. So the fact that this could have been prevented, according to like
Right.
Rick Caruso and what reports are coming out, is really crazy to think of. And at the same time, I do appreciate journalists like you that are asking those hard questions to get answers to all of us, the masses. But at the same time, what do politicians do? They're really good at not answering a question or finding a way to pivot, and then the answer does not get ever, come out, essentially.
Yeah, or they're really good also at shifting the blame, right?
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what happened with Mayor Bassa. She ended up, quote unquote, firing, the
Oh
the
yeah.
fire chief. And from what had heard, it wasn't really like a firing. It's just they just wanted a public appearance
Mm.
being fired. But apparently, that chief was actually just put somewhere else. She was put in a different role within the fire department.
Interesting.
But of course, the headline just said that she was fired or she was taken away from that. And so, of course, the people are like, okay, well, at least there's some
Right.
accountability. But if you dig further, it actually just turns out that she was moved away. And yeah, you brought up a good point with the fire hydrants. That is something again that in talking with some of the fire department, one thing that they tell me is that a lot of the homeless people tap into these fire hydrants because they want
Wow.
access to water. So whether that water is to drink, or they put it into like containers to keep for weeks on end, or to just take showers, or for whatever reason they tap
Sure.
into it. What they've noticed is sometimes they're actually trying to respond to a real emergency and put out fires. And when they tap into these fire hydrants that have been already tapped into, there's low water
Mm.
pressure. And so again, I think that this is again like it's a sequence of events that it seems like everything just happened to go wrong. And again, the question should be is how can we prevent this in the future and make sure that we're holding our representatives accountable in making sure this doesn't happen again. And I think that that should be a fair assessment if you're an honest person, whether you are Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or Tea Party or progressive or liberal or conservative Republican, doesn't matter. Um, these are questions that you should demand of your elected officials. And again, the goal here is not necessarily to blame one political party. It's just to get answers and make sure this doesn't happen again, that more people don't lose their
Mm-hmm.
lives, and just making sure that we live in a safe county. Because I think at the end of the day, any American can just say, look, I just want to know that my community is going to be safe should this ever happen again, and that my family is not going to have to evacuate, or that my children are living in a safe community and that we're not being neglected, and some of the questions we have are not going
Mm-hmm.
unanswered. And so I think that that's kind of what should unify people is, hey, let's just ask questions and let's make sure this doesn't happen again.
Right. I really hope people that. Sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Gonna say, it just seems like time and time again, California voters like just let us down though when it comes time to vote. I feel. I mean, they like. I don't know. What do you guys think about this? But a good example is the interview from, I believe it's Katie Porter that's running for governor, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So she had an interview, and I think this moment went viral. But the reporter had asked her, uh, like, are you going to speak to the Trump supporters that voted for him in the presidential election? And her response was like, why would I need to worry about them? And why would she feel so comfortable saying that? Like, that's the thing that's crazy to me. Why would you feel that comfortable admitting it? And it just, I think that, that's an obvious statement of how people vote in California. Like, they're just going to vote based on party and that's it. I mean, what do you
Yeah.
think about
So
that?
no, yeah. So I know in California, Democrats outperformed Republicans 2-1. If I'm not mistaken, the latest numbers, I believe it was something like 4 or 5 million Republicans to 8 or 9 million Democrats.
Mm.
And the reality is, Democrats have the supermajority in California. They can pass any bill without any Republican support because there's such few representation of Republicans elected into the state assembly and the state senate, and then obviously
Mhm.
the governor's office. Although there does seem to be some kind of momentum that looks like that might be coming to an end. I don't know if as soon as 2026, but I would say in the next 5 years or so, maybe 2028, 2030 would be looking like better years for California as far as just kind of fair representation. But it also hinders on this new Prop 50 that's happening. But I think with Katie Porter, it's always kind of been known, if you're kind of in the know in politics, that she is kind of a terrible person to her staff. And there is other videos coming out of her on Zoom calls, kind of yelling and kind of berating some of her staff, just from political events that I've attended, and in talking with some of the gubernatorial candidates. That's kind of just a well-known fact about Katie Porter, is just that really bad attitude that she has, and again, just kind of berating and degrading her staffers. which I kind of always just kind of joke, but I'm being serious that if you like staffers for all these politicians have all the power to bring these politicians down because they just know so much. They're around these politicians so long and for so long that they know kind of all these little secrets and maybe like who these people really are outside of the camera or behind the camera, right? They can kind of tell you, oh, this person's terrible, or this is what this person does in secret, etc. So staffers kind of held a lot of power there in that sense. But what Katie Porter was trying to say, and she just said it so poorly, was, and she kind of alluded to it in her response, was she is in Orange County. Orange County, California is kind of known as a Republican stronghold in California. And a lot of people see her, more as a moderate. She's not really seen as a progressive, even though she does have some progressive policies she's talked about. But at least in Orange County, in talking to a lot of Orange County residents, she's seen more as a moderate. She's willing to sit down with Republicans and kind of hear what they have to say, et cetera. And I think what she was trying to say is that why would she be forced to sit down with Trump supporters when she already represents a district that has a
Mm.
lot of Trump supporters, right? So I think what she was trying to say is I don't really need to focus on that because I'm already proof that I can talk to both sides. It just came
Okay.
out very poorly. You know what I'm saying? I know some people have kind of said like I think she knows she has it in the bag. I don't think that that's what she meant personally. Maybe it could be, right. I would love to sit down with her and kind of press her on that. I just don't think
Mhm.
she's going to be willing to sit down with me and answer that question specifically. But I think that what she was trying to say is I've already talked to the left and the right. I'm not necessarily concerned with that. I'm more concerned with XYZ. But it did just come off as pompous, kind of saying, I don't really need to focus on that. And she just worded it poorly and it came off poorly. And of course, it doesn't help the fact that when she was pressed on that question, basically saying, look, 10 counties in California flipped from Democrat to Republican during the 2024 election and about 40% of Californians, registered voters, voted for Donald Trump in 2024. You're going to have to talk to way more people outside of Orange County. You're going to have to go up and down and say you're not just focusing on Orange County Republicans because Republicans in Orange County are not the same as Republicans in rural areas or agricultural areas of California. So I think that it was kind of insinuated in the question. Sure, Orange County Republicans, it seems like you've talked to them, but how are you going to reach out to the rest of the state Republicans, especially there are more hardcore MAGA Republicans, some of these farmers? What about the Republicans in Silicon Valley, albeit maybe a smaller percentage? What's your message to them? And she just came out as again kind of pompous and kind of like, I don't need to answer these questions from you, and then putting up her hands and saying, let me stop you right there. I'm done. I'm done with this interview. To me, that interview just kind of showed that I don't think she's ready for the big leagues. I think that sure she's got some experience with politics, which is not necessarily something that voters are looking for. Sometimes voters are kind of looking for that
Mhm.
grassroots leadership. They're not necessarily looking for a well-established kind of politician that has a lot of political experience. And so I think that she was already kind of coming from that background, and people were kind of like, I don't know if I should trust this person or not. But then to come off as a person that when they get a little bit of pushback during an interview, they just want to stop the interview. I think that left a lot of Californians with kind of the mentality of, well, if this person can handle an interview, are they ready to tackle a leadership position of such magnitude? Because California is no small state. California, has the fourth largest GDP in the world, not just in the nation. This isn't like a state that does and performs well GDP wise in the nation, but it's actually the fourth largest GDP in the world, and so
Mhm.
that's very important. A lot of it is obviously because of the Silicon Valley is based out of California, with some of it, like Elon Musk, kind of moving away from California, but it's still large enough that we're bringing in that fourth largest GDP, and so I think with Katie Porter, she needed to have kind of shown more being able to handle that kind of pressure. And so again, I think Californians are like, I don't know if this person is going to be able to handle even worse pressure than this. And then what happens when she has 10 reporters or 20 reporters with microphones shoved in her face demanding answers? What's going to happen then? And
Storm
so
out.
yeah, exactly. And so we'll
Yeah.
we'll we'll see. I think honestly there is this big campaign against her because she was seen as kind of like this person that was set to inherit kind of the throne of sorts. And so I think that that's why the knives are out from both Democrats and Republicans, because even some of her fellow Democrats have kind of criticized her handling of that podcast as just really done really poor and in poor taste. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think that, yeah, she's on the decline, and I think she knows it.
Right.
Hmm. Hey,
Thank you
great
for
insight.
saying
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Of course.
Let's move on to Prop 50. If you can inform the audience what that is, the pros and cons to it. I think Chris and I are not too familiar with it, so it'd be good for us as well.
Sure, yeah. So a lot of Californians might not know. A lot of Californians might not know that we have Prop 50 coming up. It's a special election this November 4th, which is just a few weeks away. I think we're actually exactly 20 days or 25 days, something like that, away from. I think it's 25 days away from this special election. And basically, we're just voting on one thing. I've actually had some people reach out to me like, "Hey, who should I vote for governor in November 4th, or who should I vote for this, or is there like a," and I'm like, no. It's just one thing we're all voting on. They spend about $300 million on this special election, money that, of course, we do not have.
Wow.
And of course, we're in a deficit at the state level. But this special election basically is just one single proposition, Prop 50, in which Governor Newsom is basically saying, hey, Californians, I need you guys to give me temporary powers so that we can go ahead and combat the Republican agenda. And essentially what this is in 2010, Californians decided that the redistricting, or the way there's going to be equal representation of political parties within California, should not be left in the hands of a governor. It should not be left in the hands of one major political party. This actually should be like a completely independent board, not beholden to any political party. And so California voters decided back then, yes, we agree. A governor should not have that power. No political party should have that power, because if we end up in an instance where that political party is in power enough that they can do whatever they want, we don't want them to go ahead and start shifting things around in California, where we have less representation of the millions of voters that are not Democrat or not Republican. You're talking about independents, no party preference, also known as MPPs. You've got libertarians, you've got Tea Party, you name it, right? You got all these different parties that are going to be disenfranchised should this measure pass. So essentially what the governor is asking California voters is, hey, give me the power to ignore that 2010 independent board. Give me the power, give my party the power to be able to just do what we want, so that we can thwart our political enemies. And so this is in response, according to Governor Newsom, to Texas, kind of essentially doing the same thing. Texas does not have that independent board. It really is up to whatever political party is in power in Texas. And right now it's the Republican Party, even though the last couple of years have kind of shifted more in favor of Democrats. So they don't have that same independent board. And so the governor is just kind of able to do things over. And what's interesting about Texas, however, is that despite them saying that maybe we might do it, okay, yes, we're going to do it. Okay, actually, we're having problems at the state legislature doing it. Gavin Newsom said that this was a response in Texas, but then later in that same bill that they passed for Proposition 50, they said, actually, we just want to go ahead and hold a special election, even if Texas doesn't do it. So initially it was kind of a, hey, this is a response to what Texas is doing. And then later they had to amend the bill saying, even if Texas does not go through with their redistricting, we're just going to go ahead and have this election anyway. So it's kind of like they lied about it, which it should be no surprise to anyone that politicians just lie for personal gain or personal favor. And so I think that, the way I would sell this, and the messaging behind it is, if you think that a political party in power should have all the power to kind of redistrict and change things around California to better their political party or their personal bias, then by all means, vote yes on Prop 50. But if you are someone like myself that doesn't believe that either Republicans or Democrats should have that power, regardless of who holds the supermajority in California, then you should be voting no. Because by voting no, you're voting in alignment with what California voters voted in 2010
Mm.
and established. We've already decided as residents of California, as voters of California, this shouldn't be in the hands of Republicans or Democrats or libertarians or anybody, because we want equal representation and fairness at the state level for all political parties and all political voters. It doesn't matter, who has the majority. And so I would say that if you're doing this because you want to kind of give the middle finger to Republicans or other political parties, just remember that there could be a time where California does flip red or Republican, which again, we're on that trend already. Then you can't really cry wolf when Republicans in power are starting to pass these egregious laws to make sure that they remain in power in California. And so I would just say, if you want to be fair about it, you've got to vote no
Hmm.
on measure on Prop 50 come November 4th.
Realistically, I feel that if it does pass, there'll never be a movement for the Republicans in California. I would imagine Newsom's like effort in totality will be to not allow it to ever go red ever again. Essentially, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that is correct. This is supposedly an effort to kind of redistrict and get rid of 5 Republican congressional seats.
Mm.
So we're talking about the federal government, but I've actually talked to state legislators. So these are people that are not the federal government. This is a state government. We're talking about state assembly members and state senators who have actually told me that there's already talks that should the Democrats win this Prop 50 in November, just a few weeks away, that there are plans to do it at the state level, meaning that it's not just getting rid of Republicans in Congress, getting rid of these 5 Republican seats in Congress from California, but it's actually going to also now they're going to try to redistrict because they now know that they have the support. They know that they have the support of Democrats and other allies and other political parties to pass it, not just at the federal level. So they're just going to be like, well, why not just do it at the state level and get rid of Republican representation at the state level, at the
Mm.
assembly and the Senate? And so this is what I would call one of the most consequential elections in California's modern history, in the sense that, yes, I think you are right that should they win at the congressional level with this Prop 50, I think that it'll only be a couple of months or maybe even November of next year, 2026, during the midterm election, we'll start seeing propositions to allow Democrats and the supermajority and Gavin Newsom to sign legislation to get rid of Republican representation and just basically make California the foundation and kind of the stronghold for the Democratic Party, where I think that maybe we will not see any real Republican wins potentially for the next few decades, maybe even our lifetime,
Hmm.
depending on how things go. And so, obviously, that is also kind of in line with like Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. Saying that he's going to work on voter reform and kind of clean up the voter rolls and make sure that the elections are safe and that it's being done legally and in a way where people are showing their ID and stuff. I think that despite the redistricting, if we have these called quote unquote honest elections, I still think that Republicans can still win across the state. It's just gonna be harder. So I would say don't give up hope, even if it passes. I would just say the work got a little bit harder, but it's definitely not impossible because I think that again, 2024 showed us that I think Republicans are on track to gain popularity in California. I think that the one party state that's been in charge for decades has not been working. And it's kind of hard to trust that same party to fix a lot of the problems that they've either created themselves or have been overseeing and promising that they're going to fix, but haven't,
Hmm.
despite almost 30 years of complete state control. And so I think people are just kind of waking up to that. And so we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Right. I do appreciate you sharing that. And it was very objective how you initially described it. So, those that are listening or watching, to your however you make a decision, go out and vote and do that. I know you've been pushing that, Anthony, not necessarily to vote no, even though that's where you lie in terms of your beliefs, but you've been just telling people to vote for that at the very least.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
No, on measure on Prop 50.
Actually, what I wanted to ask you was, is there the other side of the argument? Is there a good case to be made, or is this just a bad decision altogether to vote in favor of it?
I mean,
Is there
the
any
only
good
real,
to it?
they're only no. I mean, it just depends who you're asking. If you're asking Democrats, is there any good to it? This is the best thing that could happen to them because they're
yeah.
basically erasing all Republican representation at the federal level, but then they're going to come after a state level. So, to a hardcore Democrat, if you're one of those people that just hate Republicans for the sake of hating them, if you hate
Right.
everything they stand for, if you hate Donald Trump, if you ask those people, then there's a great case for you to vote yes on this. But if you're kind of a little bit more independent, if you're like I lean more conservative, but I try to be as independent as I can because I would never, as a voter, want to tell a political party that no matter what they do, that they have my guaranteed vote forever, just
Yeah.
because they happen to be a party that I align with the most. I make Republicans fight for my vote. I want Republicans not to feel like they have a guaranteed vote in me, but that they have to
Right.
fight harder every election, every election cycle, to get my vote. Because there are things that I can sometimes say, oh, I vote more Democrat this way, or I vote more Republican this way. And so I think that the future should be more independence. I don't think it should be hardcore party liners. I know that there are some, issues that some Republicans say, I will never vote, Democrat in this manner, whether it's abortion or whether it's police reform or whether it's immigration, whatever the case might be. There are very nuanced ways that both Democrats and Republicans can handle it. I think one of those prime examples is Donald Trump with the abortion issue for 2024. He didn't necessarily take a side. He didn't say, as a federal government, I'm going to make America more pro-life or more pro-choice. He basically said the Supreme Court has already decided that answer. And if you are pro-life, then at the state level, you need to fight for it. And if you are pro-choice, then at the state level, you need to fight for it. And I'm a big believer in state rights. I'm not a big fan of the federal government, to be honest. I love California as a state, and I think we should be able to self-govern as much as we can. I don't always agree with the way Democrats are running California. There are some things that I think they do right. And just so that you guys don't think I'm just saying it for the sake of saying it, we
Mhm.
have Gavin Newsom signing legislation this week to get rid of ultra processed foods for children. I think that's a really good thing. He is trying to
Nice.
protect workers from AI. I think that's a really good thing. I don't think that's talked about enough. He's also passing laws, for example, that protect Hollywood workers and Hollywood actors from being able to get AI to kind of take their likeness and basically allow AI to kind of, for example, like if someone's creating TikTok videos of Will Smith's likeness, but it's AI, then there is legislation that Will Smith can use at the California state level to come after these people because they're taking his likeness and making a profit off of it. So I think those are
Hmm.
good things, right? I think most people can agree with those kind of things. We don't want kids eating
Right.
ultra processed foods or heavy dyes in their food because it makes them sick, etc. And so that's what I mean by, like, there are some things that I can appreciate that they're doing, but again, there's other things that I might not like. But I would never tell Democrats, no matter what you do, I'm always going to vote for you. And I would never
Hmm.
tell Republicans, that, hey, no matter what you do, I'm going to vote for you, even if you piss me off, even if you vote differently, whatever, because I think it's important. And so, to your question, if you're a hardcore Democrat, you are loving it right now. You are definitely pushing for yes on Prop 50, and you're getting all your friends to push yes. Outside of that, no matter what other political party you are, I don't
Yeah.
see a positive outside of just this being extremely pro-Democrat. Um, and so, no, I would just say there is no upside that I can see in them doing this, because it just means less representation for a lot of millions of voters that don't necessarily want this to happen. And there was actually a poll earlier this year that showed 2/3 of registered voters in California that were polled were against this quote
Mhm.
unquote temporary seizure of power, because it's long been said that when the government does something temporarily, it usually ends up being permanently. And I think that in the long term, what this could also initiate and what this could lead to is red states kind of seizing full power to make their states permanently red, and blue states
Hmm.
seizing power and bypassing constitution and voters to make their states more bluer. And so I think that this is going to cause a national divide when we should be uniting and trying to focus on how can we make the lives of Americans better and easier. Obviously, we still have got cost of living is still pretty high. You still kind of got a little bit of inflation. People still can't afford homes, really. My son just turned 18, and if he wanted to buy a home, it's just completely unrealistic for him. And so
Right.
I think that instead of causing further division, which can lead to terrible places and
Mhm.
potential civil strife, civil war, not necessarily among the people, but at least between the state government and federal government, I think we should be uniting behind a lot of different things. But unfortunately, I think that with this measure, should it pass, I think it's going to embolden red states to just do whatever they need to secure more representation at the federal level and state level, and vice versa with blue states. What's interesting though is that I believe last time I checked, there's 32 states that are Republican strongholds versus I believe only like 18 states that
Mhm.
are kind of like purple/Democratic strongholds. There's not a
Mhm.
lot of Democratic strongholds versus Republican strongholds, and so it's going to be
Right.
interesting to see how
Right.
kind of what happens there, and then of course people, I think what's going to happen is a regular person is going to be like, I'm sick and tired of this. I'd rather go to a state where it's more balanced. I don't want
Yep.
ultra red. I don't want ultra blue. I want to live in a common sense state. And so
Mhm.
I think that that's where the winners are going to come out, is these states saying like, look, regardless of political party, if you come to our state, you've got a job, you've got a good cost of living, and you've got a future here. You don't have to worry about us using the state constitution or using these bogus elections and propositions and spending money we don't have to make sure that our political party is winning. We just want to be equally balanced, and we want to do things that make sense. So it'll be interesting to see. And I think that that's kind of where we're headed. Again,
Mhm.
I don't think it's a good place, but
Hmm.
unfortunately, it's just the political divide is real. I mean, you guys are probably know, and this is something that you guys can probably talk about in the future. We've got the halftime show is now being
Oh yeah.
divided. You've got Bad Bunny, right? Kind of more liberal, more kind of mainstream NFL halftime show. And now you've got Turning Point USA, which is the largest conservative nonprofit and grassroots organization in the nation, saying we're going to have our own halftime show. So again, it's just further and further divide. And it's like people are being asked to choose one side or the other, when I
Not
think
good.
most Americans are just like, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of the political divide. I
Right.
want things to go back to normal. And so it'll be interesting. I think it'll be interesting to see where we are a year from now. And I think the midterm election results will kind of show us in the direction that we're going as a nation.
Right.
Right.
Well, Anthony, we all appreciate here at Full Count Podcast.
Yes.
I know you have a hard out at 10 a.m. I did have one more question, but if you need to
Sure.
go, it's fine.
No, no, no. Go ahead. I've got like 10 minutes, man. Go ahead. That's
Okay.
fine.
Either way, what we like to do here is, especially when we have guests, we ask our guests to leave a question for our next guest. Of course, you not knowing who it is, but I'll ask you to do that in a moment. But your question from an Athletic A's MLB journalist is the following: when was a moment you felt your most authentic self? And it doesn't mean in terms of confidence, just authenticity. And then, and her name is Jessica Kleinschmidt, by the way. And then, when looking at
Okay.
forming relationships, whether it's romantic or friendship, what qualities do you look for in a friend?
So it's a two-part
Yeah.
question, right? Just to make sure.
Yes.
Okay. So the first one is, when have I felt my most authentic self? I think when I felt my most authentic self is, I mean, just I'm trying to think, is when I was running marathons. I was training for like the LA marathon back in 2014.
Hmm.
I was doing triathlons, I was running. I felt pretty authentic because I feel like social media wasn't as big. It didn't consume as much as my life as it does now. I feel like I'm very busy. Not that I don't feel authentic today. I'm very happy in what I'm doing. But I felt like back then I didn't have a social media following. I had more time for other things. I wasn't doing everything on social media. And so I was more like hobby based and more like family oriented, as opposed to now just family and
Right.
politics, and politics can just be overwhelming. So I would say that maybe that's kind of when I felt my most authentic, was just kind of doing things that I loved versus working all the time. Which is fine. Everything comes in seasons, right? There's going to be years where you just really have to grind to build yourself up. And then hopefully in the future, I can go back to some of the things that I love, and feeling authentic. And then the second question was, remind me again. Sorry.
No, I totally get it. When looking at forming relationships, whether it's a romantic
Okay.
or just a general friendship with the boys, what qualities are you
Yeah.
looking for in between you and that person?
That's a good question. And man, this is really good. So definitely not romantically. I am happily married. Um, but I would say that when forming friendships, I guess I expected like people that don't expect me to do, how do I say this? I want people that are going to help me grow.
Mm,
I don't want fake people. I don't want people that are focused in the right now,
mm.
meaning like, hey, let's go out and have a drink and let's watch some sports. And then that's all they ever reach
Right.
out to me for. It's like, let's have a good time.
Mm,
I want people that I can help grow. I want people that are pushing me to be better, that are kind of in the same mindset. Like if you're not growing with those people around you, you're kind of being held back, because unfortunately there's people that I used to be friends with, and they've just got that same mentality of, let's just have as much fun as we can have, and let's get drunk and let's watch sports. But in the
always
reality of
funny.
things, that wasn't helping me grow,
Uh-huh.
and it definitely wasn't helping me as an entrepreneur to grow bigger and make more income for my family. If anything, it was taking away time. And
Mm,
so with like people like, you and I talked about this, we had lunch not too long ago. It's like you need to surround yourself around people that are in that same mindset, that want the same things, and that want to attain a higher societal like status. Not in the sense of like, I don't want me and all my friends to be famous. That's not what I'm saying. But I want us to be in the same mindset of like, let's be better people.
right.
Let's break these chains that used to hold our family back. Oh, we're known, as Hispanics, we're known to get drunk at baby showers. Let's stop that. You know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of like, we don't have to accept societal norms, and we don't have to go out to the game every weekend or to the bar every weekend. We
Okay.
don't have to get drunk every week to have fun. Let's break that stigma. And how can we help each other out grow, and how can we become way better people than maybe our parents or grandparents, and make sure that we are leaving behind a legacy or an empire for our children, so they can do better in life
Mm,
themselves. And so that's kind of my mindset when I make a new friend. I don't want you hitting me up every Friday to go to the bar. I want you hitting me up every couple weeks or every couple months and saying, Anthony, I've got this great idea that I want you to be part of, and I think that this is what we can do with it, and it'll have a lasting impression.
mhm.
Those are the kind of friends I'm looking for.
You are the
Yeah.
average of your five closest friends. That's a quote that I heard, and I think that rings true. You're the average of the five closest friends. So
Absolutely.
ideally, your four friends should be better than you. Unfortunately, I
Yeah.
have Andrew as a friend, so I might need to replace him one day. No, I'm just kidding.
Too funny. That's awesome, man. I think those are some great qualities to look for, and I really hope people listening can focus on that. What is your question for our next guest?
I guess my question for the next guest is, what are they doing in the next year or two that is going to set them apart from where they were 2 or 3 years ago? So what are you
Mm,
doing today that is going to make sure that in 3 years your life looks completely different? Whether it's physical, right? Some people want to lose weight or they want to be in better shape, or some people want a career change, right? But like, what are you doing to kind of attain that goal that might seem out of reach? So that would be my question to the next person.
very
Great
good.
question.
Yeah. Thanks so much. We do appreciate you.
Thank you.
Like, subscribe, everyone watching, and if you want to leave your Instagram handle so people can follow you.
Sure, yeah. So if you guys want to follow my website that has all my socials, it's just www.informedwithanthony.com, or you guys can just follow me on socials. Instagram is my largest platform, just at Inform with Anthony, and that's basically across all socials. So yeah, thank you again so much, both of you, for having me. Chris, congratulations on the move out there. Super
Thank you.
excited for you, man. I think you're going to make, and I hope you guys make a lot of network connections out there, and just better for your life and better for your family. That's good stuff, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you, Andrew, again, bro. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Talk to you later.